Concealment and Disclosure of the Face of the Creator by Baal HaSulam.
Concealment and disclosure of the face of the Creator. One concealment depiction. His face is not revealed. That is, the Creator does not behave towards a person according to his name, the good who does good. Rather, it is to the contrary. One is afflicted by him or suffers from poor income. Many people wish to collect their debts from him, make his life bitter. His whole day is filled with troubles and worries. Or one suffers from poor health and disrespect from people. Every plan he begins, he fails to complete, and he is constantly frustrated.
In this manner, of course, one does not see the Creator's good face. That is, if he believes that the Creator is the one who does these things to him, either as punishment for transgressions or toward him in the end. This follows the verse, whom the Lord loves, he corrects, and also the righteous begin with suffering, since the Creator wishes to eventually impart them great peace. One does not fail in saying that all this came to him by blind fate and by nature without any reason and consideration. Rather, one strengthens in believing that the Creator, with his guidance, caused him all that. This is nevertheless considered seeing the Creator.
The second concealment, which the books refer to as concealment within concealment, means that one cannot see even the back of the Creator. Instead, one says that the Creator has left him and no longer watches over him. He ascribes all the suffering he feels to blind fate and to nature, since the ways of providence become so complex in one's eyes that they lead one to denial. This means depiction that one prays and gives charity for one's troubles, but is not answered whatsoever. And precisely when one stops praying for one's troubles, one is answered. When he overcomes, believes in providence, and better his deeds, luck turns away from him, and he mercilessly falls back. And when he denies and begins to worsen his deeds, he becomes very successful and is greatly relieved.
One does not find one's sustenance in proper manners, but through deceit or through desecration of Shabbat, or of one's acquaintances who keep Torah and mitzvot, commandments, suffer poverty, illness, and are despised by people. These observers of mitzvot seem impolite to him, innately brainless, and so hypocritical that he cannot bear to be among them for even a minute. Conversely, all his wicked acquaintances who mock his faith are very successful, well-to-do, and healthy. They know no sickness. They are clever, virtuous, and good-tempered. They are carefree, confident, and tranquil all day, every day.
When providence arranges things in this manner for a person, it is called concealment within concealment. This is because then one collapses under one's weight and cannot continue to strengthen the belief that one's pains come from the Creator for some hidden reason. Finally, one fails, becomes heretic, and says that the Creator is not watching over his creations whatsoever, and all that transpires by fate and by blind nature. This is not seeing even the back.
Depiction of disclosure of the face. But once he has completely discovered the spice, the light that one inhales into one's body. Through strengthening in faith in the Creator, one becomes worthy of guidance with his face revealed. This means that the Creator behaves with him as is fitting to his name, the good who does good. Thus, depiction, he receives abundant good and great peace from the Creator and is always satisfied. This is because one obtains one's livelihood with ease. This is because one obtains one's livelihood with ease and to the fullest, never experiencing trouble or pressure, knows no illness, is highly respected by people, effortlessly completes any plan that comes to his mind, and succeeds wherever he turns.
And when he wishes upon something, he prays, and he is instantaneously answered, as he always answers everything that one demands of him, and not a single prayer is denied. When one strengthens with good deeds, one succeeds even more. And when one is negligent, one's success proportionally decreases. All of one's acquaintances are honest, of good income and health. They are highly respected in the eyes of people and have no worries at all. They are at peace all day and every day. They are smart, truthful, and so calmly that one feels blessed to be among them. Conversely, all of one's acquaintance who do not follow the path of the Torah are of poor livelihood, troubled with heavy debts, and fail to find even a single moment's rest. They are sick, in pain, and despicable in the eyes of people. They seem to him mindless, ill-mannered, wicked, and cruel towards people, deceitful, such psychopath that it is intolerable to be with them.
His name shows us that he is benevolent to all his creations in all the forms of benefit, sufficient for every kind of receiver from among Israel. Certainly the pleasure of one is not like the pleasure of another. For example, one who engages in wisdom will not enjoy honor and wealth, and one who does not engage in wisdom will not enjoy great achievements and inventions in the wisdom. Thus he gives wealth and honor to one, and wondrous achievements in the wisdom to another. One's request to become stronger in believing in his guidance over the world during the concealment period brings one to contemplate the books, the Torah, and to draw from there the light and the understanding how to strengthen one's faith in his guidance. These illuminations and observations that one receives through the Torah are called the spice of Torah. When they are collected to a certain amount, the Creator has mercy on him and pours upon him the Spirit from above, that is, the higher abundance.
Concealment and disclosure of the face of the Creator. B. Depiction of concealment of the face. Number 1. Suffering torment such as deficient income, poor health, degradations, failing to accomplish one's plans, and emotional dissatisfaction such as keeping oneself from tormenting one's friend. Number 2. Praying without being answered, declining when bettering one's actions and succeeding when worsening them, obtaining one's sustenance in improper manners, depiction, stealing or by deception, stealing, or by desecrating the Shabbat. Number 3, all of one's honest acquaintances suffer poverty, ill health, and degradations of all kinds, and one's wicked acquaintances mock him every day and succeed in health, wealth, and lead carefree lives.
All of his righteous acquaintances who keep Torah and mitzvot seem cruel, egotistical, odd, or innately stupid and impolite, as well as hypocritical. He finds it repulsive to be with them, even in the Garden of Eden, and he cannot bear to be with them for even a moment.
Depiction of disclosure of the face. Number 1. Reception of abundant goods and peace, and obtainment in one's livelihood with ease and to the fullest. One never feels paucity or ill health. He is respected wherever he turns and successfully and easily accomplishes any plan that comes to his mind. 2. When one prays, he is immediately answered. When he better his ways, he is very successful, and when he worsen his ways, he loses his success. 3. All one acquaintances who walk on the right path are wealthy, healthy, know no sickness, highly respected by people, and dwell in peace and tranquility. An acquaintance who do not follow the right path are of poor income, filled with troubles and pains, are ill, and are loathsome in the eyes of people. 4. One considers all of the righteous acquaintances as clever, reasonable, well-mannered, truthful, and so calmly that it is most pleasurable to be among them.
What are your thoughts?
It feels to me that what's playing is the intention and the relationship to the Creator. That it can be very hard. I mean, there are places there where he says when he better his deeds, he fails. And I'm asking myself, why is it that when he better his deed, he fails? And the only answer that pops into mind is because of his intention. His intention, he was bettering his deeds in order to get more reward, and he was treating or relating to the Creator as, just another something out there in the reality, which you need to somehow manipulate, do the things that he likes, meaning good deeds, and, he'll give you rewards in return. So, hey, found the trick. But that doesn't work, because that's the wrong intention. These are my thoughts at the moment.
Yes, I would like to add to that. There's seemingly something that is going on here with intention. I'd like to know a little bit more about how you can clarify that, because, number one, the light is unchanging. So the light is already perfect in its sense, and it's only pertaining to our perception of it. And we would like to think that there's no randomness, or that there is no randomness. But we read this, and it says, precisely when he stopped praying, it was answered. And in another instance, precisely when he prayed, everything will be answered. And when he wanted to be in private providence, then it stopped. It's as if, like, when is it the channel on or off? And it obviously does depend on one's internal attitude or the intention. But what is the game here? Because it obviously is dependent upon us, since the light is unchanging. It's as if there's something going on here, but it's something besides the external act. There's something else at play.
I wanted to add my thoughts about this article. The way I saw it actually was advancing the whole way through, going through double concealment into single concealment into revelation, and in every step of the way, like in double concealment, if I'm in that state, that's the way I see everything around me. If I'm in single concealment, that's the way I see everything around me. And then in revelation, everything is amazing. Everything I ask for, I get it. And then it's just that cycle again and again and again. That's the way I saw it speaking to me like that. It's just advancing and basically seeing my world through different eyes. That's the way I saw it.
Maria's question was, how is it that we say that the light doesn't change? So how is it that our perception is changing if the light doesn't change? The idea is that the light is like single. It's like electricity, right? It just has a single sort of energy to it, but it goes through all different transistors, resistances, and so forth that actually enable the whole system to work. And the electricity, it doesn't take into account, you could say, the different vessels. The vessels sort of allow the energy through it. So the idea is that the light is uniform. The light is just powering the will to receive that was predetermined, that was designed that way, that when the light would hit it, it would sort of activate and deactivate in a very fixed order of cause and consequence. We look around and we're like, oh, everything could happen, anything could happen. But the idea is that it really is that fixed predetermined state. So even though we say that the light doesn't change, we sense differences because when we're sensing it through the vessel side, right? It's like turning on and off the lights. So the power company is not like sort of asking, do you want to turn on your lights or not? So the idea is that someone in the house who's seeing his lights turn on and off, he's like, oh, you see, it's changing. And it's only from their own perspective. With this article, there's two parts. On one end, there's the part of a perception, you could say, where one person, before the barrier, I think of him as like righteous and great. And then on a higher phase, I actually look back at him and I'm like, that's an idiot. He's wicked, he's an idiot, he's a fool. So that is a perception issue since the person hasn't actually changed. The person that you're perceiving is exactly the same. You're like, has he changed in the last year? It's like, no. Who's changed? I've changed. My perception has changed. Now I view him in a totally different light. Just like when, before I learned Kabbalah, I would see the ultra-Orthodox in a certain way. And now after I learned Kabbalah, I see them in a totally different way. If before I had thought that like they were like the highest, they were doing everything right, today I know that they're doing mostly everything wrong. So I see them in a totally different way, but they haven't changed. I've changed. So that's a perception issue. The second issue is where you actually get to express yourself. And the expression goes into reality, and then there is change. You want something to happen, and it does happen. So then you can actually see a change in reality that beforehand you're like, how did it go for him? Oh, it didn't go very well for him. And then how does it go for him now? Oh, things have changed. I can see the results. It's not just a perception issue, that it's already a change in reality. So there's two parts here. There's a perception change where reality isn't changing and I'm changing. And then you could say that's the correction part. And then you've got the expression part where reality is actually changing, that people can see, oh, beforehand he didn't have what he wanted. Now he actually gets what he wants.
But I'd like to differentiate or draw here the focus of what is causing the change. Like for it not to appear as if God, this system or the creator is this person who, oh, I feel like putting you correct and I feel like putting you incorrect. Like I'm a math teacher, right? So if I put 2 + 3 and I see Susie's paper and she puts in 5, I feel like, oh, I'm going to mark it wrong for you. And John puts 5 and I feel like marking it right. There's something else that's triggering the outcome of whatever was created. For example, in the reading, it said exactly when he stops praying, it is granted, if you will. And then another part of it says exactly when he prays, everything is granted. So it's as if the same thing went in, but a different outcome was outputted, or it gave a different result. But it wasn't because of the creator saying, I feel like granting it for this one, or I feel like not granting it for this one, but instead, how is it that one's intention affects this tuning to determine what the outcome will be if the light is unchanging? How is it that we actually are influencing the system to change our perception, if you will?
So with your example, let's say with the math teacher, you could say the math teacher is not aware of everything that the student will do. And therefore, there's sort of like this reciprocal connection where it's like, let's see what you've done, and I'll respond accordingly. But the creator doesn't have to respond since he determined everything. So there's no response. It's not like, oh, if I do good deeds, then the creator is like, oh, you did good deeds, here's a reward. Or you're doing bad deeds, oh, now I'm going to have to punish you. Right? The idea is that the creator knows all. It's all predetermined. The difference is we say the difference between a uncorrected vessel and a corrected vessel is whether it has a screen on it. So the screen inverts, right, the light that's coming into the vessel from, you could say, minus, where it's felt as pain. The screen inverts it into a plus, where it's felt as pleasure. So the change is not in the light, the change is in the screen. So you've basically got two states for a vessel. You've got whether the vessel is on or off, which you could say whether the desire is on or off, and then whether there's an inversion, a screen on top of that desire that will invert how the vessel is going to feel that. Is it going to feel it as pain, which is a minus, or as pleasure, which is a plus? But the light is not changing here. What's changing is that the vessels are turning on and off, and the screen on top of each vessel is turning on and off on each desire.
That is helpful. Thank you.
So it is basically saying that before you have a screen, you're actually on concealment or double concealment.
So the idea is that there's two parts. There's our desires and there's our perception, right? So even after the barrier, you can have a desire for ice cream, and you'll eat that ice cream, and there won't be a screen on that ice cream, right? Because it's such a, you could say, a low desire that it doesn't need a screen even, right? The screen is needed only on the desires which are perception. Only those need to have that ability to handle the dichotomy, to handle the opposite, to able to invert it, to thinking beforehand that it's bad, and then with the screen to now see it as good. So eating the ice cream before and after the barrier will be exactly the same. What will change is the way you perceive situations. Mostly, I would say, with interaction with people, right? So the screen is more going to deal with those high desires, deal with more with the interaction of people. It's not like you're going to, before the barrier, see a tree one way, and then after the barrier, see the tree a different way. The tree will stay exactly the same, and the way you perceive it will be exactly the same. For one very easy reason, because if you're going to be interacting with somebody else who's on a certain other degree, you want to see the same reality. Right, so you want to see the tree the same, right? You don't want to see an extra branch or something like that. The difference is when in your perception of people and how they interact. So one person might think of that person as evil, and you might actually see that person as righteous and great. So that is more of a, depending on the perception of the person and not the actual physical desires. The idea is that Kabbalah doesn't actually deal with the physical senses, the physical desires. It deals with the perception part. It deals with how you perceive situations and how you can affect those situations by manipulating other people through their desires, behind the scenes, through internal power. So you're basically, Kabbalah only deals with that speaking degree, with dealing with people, how they interact and how you interact with them and how you affect them and manipulate them accordingly. With internal power, of course.
But what, in response to what Michael asked, what popped into my mind was that double concealment is like having no relationship to the creator. There's no connection between you. Having a single concealment is a stage where you already have some kind of connection. It can be any kind of connection, but you have a sense, that's what I got from the article, that there's something which is different than the reality in which you exist. And so you may be angry at him, you may think he's not looking over his creations and so forth, but even thinking all of those things is already a reflection of you having some kind of grasp that there's something which you're missing, something which is not just yet requires the same attitude, the same approach, the same relationship as everything else that you've had so far. That's what popped into my mind.
I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment. I think it is a question. In regards to what Moshe said, you know, our perception of the system does at times appear random, and then a little bit less random until we like click it. Like when he said it's through the spaces that at the end, it's as if it's unconnected. It's so chaotic, and then we still see it disconnected, but it's less chaotic, and then we actually see the connection, if you will. But my question is this a revolving situation? Like, is this like a phase that goes from disclosure to face, or this is continuous on different levels of perception or different situations that we'll go around and see? Like I've had situations where I can be listening to a lesson, and at times Rav seems so perfect. Like I can see him and say, gosh, I get what he's trying to do. And at times he seems such an evil person to me at times, right? But you were mentioning that sometimes one person can see someone as evil, another person can see it as righteous. No, I'm actually saying me looking at the same person, and at different times it could seem different in my eyes, the same person. So is this because it's a revolving thing as we progress, or what is it?
Yeah, it is like when you a person, let's say, you know, you're looking at a certain person, and the way you feel about them will change over time, and it's not that the other person is changing. Sometimes it will be because the other person's changed also, but sometimes it will be that the other person hasn't changed, and you have changed the way you think of them. That beforehand you thought of them as wise, as a mentor, and then afterwards you saw them as a fool, an idiot. And they haven't actually changed. You've changed. But it can sometimes like go, like you're saying, like in a cycle, where one moment you're like, oh, they're the smartest person. And then the next day you're like, they're a fool. And then the day after it's like, wow, they're smart again. Wow, how they've changed so quickly. And then the next day after that, you're like, he's a fool again. And the idea is that that person probably hasn't changed. It's you are going through these descents in a sense, and they sort of change the way you perceive the person. I'd say at some point it does actually equalize, and then you sort of the way you perceive someone is very constant. You could say it doesn't go through those ups and downs as much.
I want to say that maybe also it has to do when what I was sensing was more of a feeling versus having that intention present, or else I guess I wouldn't have been affected or as much, or I'm not sure. But sometimes when I realize why am I so upset about it, it ends up being that I was not looking at it correctly. At least so it feels once I'm now perceiving this person as righteous, if you will.
Sometimes what can happen is that you can fall into a shell, and then suddenly someone that you perceived highly beforehand, when you fall into a shell, you suddenly perceive them in the opposite way. And you suddenly have so much criticism and conflict that, you know, you look back before you were in a shell, and everything was fine. And the idea is that you can go through these states, the other person hasn't actually changed, but you think they've changed. And that, I would say, is where the environment actually comes into play, where you can ask other people, like, has he changed or have I changed? And then you can sort of get that sort of alignment, because if you're just one against somebody else, you've got no sort of anchor, you've got no way to know, is this a perception issue or is this a reality issue? Like, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And if other people are seeing the same thing, then there's probably some, more truth to it. While if you're the only one perceiving it, maybe you've got it wrong. So it's like sometimes, in a lesson, I'll say to someone, did you hear what Rav just said? And other people won't hear it. And then I'll find somebody else who did also hear it. And then I'm like, okay, so it wasn't like I was crazy. I wasn't the only one who heard it. So I'd say that's one of the advantages of an environment. It really allows you to anchor yourself and see, are you just, are you the problem? Are you the one who's seeing it wrong? Or is it just, actually in reality it's wrong? It's like, many times I joke with a friend that, let's say we see a glass of water and, I actually asked for a glass of juice. I'm like, oh, if you were corrected, you'd see it as a glass of juice. And it's a joke, of course, because the idea is that we all see the same reality, right? So it's more how we interpret things, which is different for each person. The reality should be the same unless you're crazy, of course, and then, or delusional.
Well, there's a danger even in listening to that, because I know myself, and I'll either will seek validation from those that I know will validate that what I heard was correct, or I won't seek validation from anybody because I don't need it. I know that I'm right, and that's it. But it's kind of more painful for me to even consider that those that are telling me that I'm perceiving it incorrectly are right. I don't want to, I don't like it. And, and I guess that comes back to the environment and in trying to get that influence back. Looking at it afterwards, I've gone through these states so many times. Like I've gotten these emotions, and I think when you start to observe it more and say, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. This has happened before, and try to, like Yossi said, it has to do with this intention, But I can try to trick myself as to who to seek to validate that what I'm wanting to hear is correct, and maybe have a harder time trying to switch into the next channel, like from a descent to an ascent, if you will, or I don't know. It gets tricky.
I totally agree with you. That's why it really depends on the preparation you're doing beforehand with your environment, right? That even if you fall into a descent or a shell, the preparation you've done beforehand will decide how you get out of it. So if you come to let's say to the society, and you have a very good sort of fake connection with them, the slightest descent will throw you out. And I've seen it happen to people where they're all like, oh yeah, connection, I love everybody. Then they get a little descent, more than they're used to handling. And then suddenly like, oh, the society's wrong. They should have sent me to the Congress. How could they do this to me? Everyone's siding with with the society's decision. Who are they to decide? That's it, I'm out. I even wrote an article of someone who went through that, of that exact thing, that he wasn't accepted to go to a Congress, and then he left because they wouldn't accept him. And it's like, but a week before that he was all like, kumbaya, and all like, oh, I love the friends and everything, and then he hasn't gone back since. So you're like, how did you just suddenly switch so quickly from this sort of thinking that you're loving others, and then very quickly finding that you didn't love them at all, because you so quickly changed on them and didn't even talk with them, didn't converse with them, didn't allow them to actually say anything about the matter. And normally, if there's a sudden shift, I'd say it's normally in the person that's perceiving it, and not in the other person. So normally people don't actually change the changes don't shift so quickly. If Rav's talking one way, one day one thing, he's not going to suddenly the next day just totally go off the cliff. It's probably your perception that that has changed and suddenly seeing him wrong. So you're probably either in a shell or descent or something like that. And the idea, at the end of the day, it's all about experience. So if you've gone through it, a few times, you can sort of start to gain more and more experience of to identify points when you're sort of going through those sudden changes and not that reality has actually changed that far.
I want to ask about, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I get the changes of perception. It's easier for me to understand it. But it's not only a change of perception, meaning like we have a certain level of control over the reality. We actually create the reality. And I'm sort of like wondering if it's only by the intention, meaning if I have an intention of growing spiritually, I have a feeling that all of the other desires sort of like respond to me being focused on that goal. They become less important, kind of. And I kind of wonder if you can speak about how, if, first of all, it's the change of intention that changes the reality, or is it something else in addition? What is it that changes the reality? How does it work in the system?
So we said
how do we affect the reality? Not only our perception. A perception, I get it, but the reality itself.
So there's two parts we said. It's called the light of mercy and the light of wisdom. The light of mercy is called correction of a desire. So you could say it's correction of our perception. Like we talked about before, where one day I perceive it one way and the next day I perceive it in a totally different way. That is called the light of mercy, where you go through correction in your perception. That's advancing through the phases, basically from before the barrier until end of correction, you're going through correction, right? That's what's called end of correction, where you correct the way you see the world. And that's just a perception part. The second part starts around, I would say, 1.3 after the barrier, where the expression actually starts to come in. And expression is different from correction. So expression is light of wisdom, where you're actually making changes in reality. So it's not just a perception issue of you're seeing it different, but other people outside of you can see the changes that are happening. They're like, beforehand, it was hard for him to get a house. And now, for some reason, he's able to get a house very quickly. He sees an advertisement of a house. He wants that house and gets it without any, he's able to rent it, even though, it's delayed a few days. Maybe somebody else will take it. And he gets exactly the house he wants. It's the first house he saw. And he gets it immediately. It's like, wow, what changed? How is, beforehand, it used to take him time. He would rent, the houses he'd find weren't very good. They would have problems with it. They were like basement houses. And now he's got a place with, it's like a mansion with a patio and a penthouse sort of thing. And it's like, well, what changed? That's not a perception change. It's not like he's like, oh yeah, you might see it as a basement house, but I see it as a penthouse. No, it's very easy for, people to see you're in a basement house. And so that's a change in reality that you're like, look at my house. I was able to get this so quickly done, right? I had a prayer, I had a desire that I wanted to come into fruition, and it happened very quickly. You could say immediately. That is already a change in reality. That's an expression of internal power, where your desires are just super clean. You've already gone through the correction, and you're just increasing the expression of your desires. And that's why you first got the correction of the desires, which is cleaning those concepts, cleaning the perception of the way you see the world. And then simultaneously, when you're going through more advanced phases of correction, then you actually start dealing with the expression part, where you're actually able to desire things internally and see them manifest externally.
Okay, and let me give you an example. For example, yesterday I was very hungry and I'm trying to lose weight. So there was sort of struggle inside me. Should I eat? Should I not eat? The usual. But when I started thinking about this debate inside me and asking questions about it, like, how does this debate that is going inside me helping me to progress? At that very moment when I did that, I felt like I'm not really so much in that debate. I mean, it became less powerful. This feeling, this sensation, what is your interpretation of it from the Kabbalah point of view?
That is a perception change, not a reality change. It's the way you perceive your desires. So it's not something you can convey to somebody else. You can't be like, oh, look how I've changed. It's more like the way you perceive yourself. And it's not a change in others. You could say it's a change in self. So you could say a change in self is it's called correction, and a change in others is called expression. Not the way you perceive others, but the actual way that they change the way the things they do and stuff. So what you're expressing is a change in perception. The way, for example, one day you're like thinking this is delicious, and the next day you're like, this is not delicious. And that's a change in the way you relate to your own desires.
So any change in perspective is considered a correction, or only specific changes that are in support of my advancement?
The correction is the correction of the states, basically advancing the states. The result of a state will be the way you interpret things, right? So if, for example, you're on a certain phase, the way you'll look around at certain people, at foods and stuff like that, will interpret one way. Then you advance to a higher phase by collecting discernments on the path and stuff. And then in that higher phase, you'll suddenly view the same people, the same foods, and the same desires just differently. Right? So the change is a result of your advancement through the phases.
And you said, you mentioned, you used the expression of perception of our desires. You didn't say perception of reality. Is that deliberate, or as far as you're concerned, reality is reflection of our desires?
Reality is a reflection of our desires, but the idea is that it's a result, right? It's not, it's, if I, for example, one day like a TV show and then the next day I don't like the TV show, is there going to be a result in reality? Yes, I won't be watching the TV show anymore, right? But it's a change in my perception of the TV show. The TV show hasn't changed. I've changed, right? So that's a perception difference. But if, for example, a certain show is like going in a certain direction, right? And let's say, I use my internal power and sort of change the direction that the show is going, right? I never talk to the directors, and I've talked to anything, and I want the show to go in a different direction, let's say. For internal power, of course, with the correct goal and everything. And I'm like, you know what? I want the show to change direction. I want it to be, less violence, let's say. And I use my internal power in it and, affect, let's say I know the directors and affect them internally. I've never said a word to them. And then suddenly the show starts changing direction, it starts becoming less violent, right? That is not a change in perception. Other people can see the change as well. So it's not that I've changed, it's reality has changed because the TV show is different. You can say, look, beforehand it was more violent, now it's less violent. So the change is for others to see. It's not like when I change, it's like, oh, the TV show hasn't changed, but I've changed. It's a very violent show. Beforehand I was okay with violence, and now I'm not okay with violence. So the change is in me, not in the TV show itself. And that's what I mean, like the difference between change of perception of reality and reality itself changing. So if one day I like a food and the other day I don't like a food, that's a change of perception of reality. It's the way I perceive the food. It's different. But if one day I go into the restaurant and they're serving meat, and then the next day I go into the restaurant and they're serving fish, that is not a change in my perception, that's a change in reality.
I have two questions. One, what is the difference between the filling, like the desires of filling, for example, food, money, knowledge, power? What is the difference between power as a filling versus control? And meaning not necessarily using control externally versus internally, but what is the difference between feeling of power and being in tune and in connection with the system? Meaning, like, for example, you wanted a house, right? Let's say someone wants a house and he wants it this and this and this way. In which way did that house provide and fuel the goal? And is that why it was so easily that it so easily came to him or her? And yes, basically, I want to differentiate between wanting Maria, wanting the control so that I can behind the scenes give Maria everything she really, really wants to receive filling up, versus, yes, getting it, but still being in tune with that goal, with that ultimate goal of the system. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the idea is it's actually not money, power, and knowledge. It's money, honor, and knowledge. Honor is actually not control and power. Honor is like a title. It's like a sort of showing who's boss, you could say, right? Showing ownership. You could say that's honor. While control, well, especially when we're talking about internal control, that's manipulating the situation without the other person even being aware of your title, right? So it's like, think of the difference between being a king and everybody knowing you're being the king, then being like a secretive king that no one actually knows you're the king, but you're still in control of everything. You control the wars, you're in control of the finances, you control of everything, but no one actually knows you're the king, right? So you could say that's sort of a difference between external and internal. With external, it's visible who's in charge, and with internal, it's not so. It's not. People can't actually see who's in charge. And if they're seeing who's in charge, it's only because he wants to be able to give this to them as well, to show them, look, you see, like other people won't see this. I'm showing this to you because I want you to be able to have this ability as well. And one of the difference between honor and control, honor is a feeling of honor is the enjoyment of people below you. While control, the enjoyment is not actually of people below you, but of people actually advancing and growing, right? So in honor, there's no enjoyment of growth of people. Not what normally happens when someone has honor over others, he keeps them where they are and he makes sure they stay there. And he's not actually interested for them to actually grow and replace him. He's more interested of always keeping that distance between the person in charge and the person and the people that he's controlling externally. While someone who's after internal power actually cares more about their growth, their advancement. That's all he cares about. He cares about their internal power and doesn't care about their desire to plateau or to fill themselves. He only cares about their advancement. So he's actually wanting them to not only advance and replace him, but even go further than him. Like, some might take longer, and he'll want his students to surpass him. And that's totally okay, because at the end of the day, he cares about the through-output of the system. It's not about them going through him. It's about more people connecting to internal power, to the system, and therefore he gets more, right? It's like the more people buying in the supermarket lowers the prices for me. So I want more people to buy in the supermarket, not because they're buying through me, but by them actually buying, it actually reduces the price for me. That's number one. Number two, if I'm wanting the house, I'm not wanting the house for the house's sake, right? Which is filling. I'm using the house because I want to, for example, enable a better place for me to do recordings, an easier place for me to get things done. It's closer to the schools of my children, so that I wouldn't have to deal with that, right? It's not about, oh, that's my dream in life. It's more about getting things out of the way so I can focus on what's important, which is advancement. So normally when someone wants a better house, they normally want it for two reasons. One is that security, that stability. And the other is that sense of value. It's like, I'm worth something because I have a better house. And that's getting a house fulfilling. Getting a house for internal power is where you're like, these are things that are bothering me and having to spend time on issues I don't want to spend time on because they've got nothing to do with my advancement and trying to make a better system for others. So by having a better house, I won't have to deal with those issues anymore. And then I can focus on what's really important to me. So it's more about using the filling to move the filling out of my view, and not actually being a value of self of, oh, now they've got a better house, I'm worth more. No, my worth is internal power, not the size of my house. If I want a better house, it's just to sort of reduce me having to deal with those issues so I can focus. What I really want to do is make better sessions and make the method easier. So the less corporeal problems I have, the more I can focus on the internal power and the growth of the method.
It feels like when you're in corporeal world, then all of those things like honor and money and so forth are somehow perceived as the goals. And when you're growing spiritually, they are becoming means to a higher goal. Is that a fair description?
Can you repeat?
Like, people think, that money and honor, these are the values that you want to live for and you want to fulfill and so forth. But when you grow spiritually, your approach to all of those things is like, these are just means to a higher goal, which is the advancement. How I'm going to use those things. I'm not satisfied by reaching them. I'm satisfied if when I have all of those feelings, I'm using them for a higher goal. They're becoming means to a higher goal. And the goal is the advancement.
Exactly. That's the difference between lo lishma, not for a sake, and lishma, which is for a sake. So you'd have someone who says, I want internal power to have more money. Right? And that is not for a sake, because you want to use Kabbalah to improve your physical life. And the end goal for you is actually to have a better physical life. That's what you care about. That's called not for a sake, before the barrier. After the barrier, for a sake, is that you still want to have, let's say, a better property or more money, but that's not your end goal. That's a means, right? It's a means too, so that I can then focus on the method. I can focus on helping other people advance, right? If I have a good job, with a good salary, I won't have to worry about how much money I'm making. I can focus on spending my time in the evenings, for example, recording sessions, talking with people, and I don't have to constantly have on my mind, what's the next job I have to take care of. So in both situations, you still got the corporeal benefit. The question is it a means or is it an end? So that's when I tell people about, a plan of, maybe in the future, system concepts will grow and maybe it'll become a company and stuff. And then everyone's like, so you're doing it for the money. It's like, no, I don't care about the money. For a company of dissemination to be successful, it has to have money. It has to have, product advertising costs a lot of money. So you're going to need money to be able to support it. So do I care about the money? Like, what am I going to use the money for? If the money is to support the company and I'm not going to be using afterwards to buy myself a Lamborghini or buy myself, some great car or, go to spas and stuff. If I don't care about that stuff, I'm using money for advancing the method. And you do need money to make good books and disseminate and stuff like that. That is not considered suddenly, I knew it. He was doing all this for the money. No, I don't. It was never about, I need money to buy stuff. I already have the money I need to buy stuff. I buy a new phone every year. Like my next phone is going to be Note 6. I currently have the Note 5. I had last year the Note 4, the year before that the Note 3, and the year before that the Note 2. So I buy exactly what I want now. I didn't need, internal power, Kabbalah for that. The idea of using internal power is always for the goal of increasing internal power, and you're basically reducing all the physical nuisances to make it easier for you to improve the method and have, you could say, more peace and stability in your physical life, but not because that's the end goal, but because it's a means to actually grow internal power and work on what's related to that.
So that's very very helpful. How does the system protect itself from a situation where somebody who's crossed the barrier and maybe the pulsar and so forth has got a lot of internal power, uses that power for something like gaining money, okay, something which has got nothing to do with the goal? How does the system protect itself? Is it possible at all, or is it once you pass the barrier and the pulsar and so forth, there's no risk of you wanting to use that power for anything else but advancement?
Again, how is money not for the goal? Remember, the problem is not the desire, the problem is the intention of why you want the money. Or do you want the money to increase your worthiness, increase your sense of self, right? Which is basically like an egoistic desire. Or are you using it to actually get more internal power and enable a situation and enable an environment to increase your internal power? So in both situations, you want money. The question is, why do you want money? Do you want a better job because you don't feel you're worthy without a better job? Then that means you don't have the correct goal in mind.
Okay, so in these two options that you just described, okay, in both situations, I want money, one for myself and one for advancement in the cause. How does the system respond to these two intentions? Will it, like in the option of you wanting money in order to advance and disseminate the system concept, then it's gonna give you your prayer, and with regard to the other option of wanting it for yourself, it's not going to give you the prayer?
Exactly. So the idea is that that's what the first restriction means. The first restriction says that you could not use internal power unless the goal is to increase internal power. And it's a law. So the idea of the law, and you can test it, right? You can say, okay, now I've got internal power. Let's say you're after the barrier and stuff. You reach, expression or something. You're like, okay, let me try it out. And I'm like, I want money to, I want a job because I feel I'm not worthy without a job. You try it out and it fails miserably. You're like, oh, well, I guess the law is intact. And then you like, I want a job not because I need to feel that, without a job I'm useless. Rather, I want a job because I need a stable income so I can spend more time on, working on the method and spending more time with other students and helping them advance accordingly. In the first option, it's going to fail miserably. And in the second option, it'll work out. So the idea of the laws that we learn in Kabbalah, they're laws. You can't circumvent them. You either do what they allow or you don't. And you can test them. That's how we know it's a law, because you can test that out and can try to use your internal power for things without the goal, and it just won't work. And you can try to do it for things with the goal and it will work. So that's the protection.
Cool. I want to, first of all, I'm asking a lot of questions. Maybe somebody else wants to, so I'll shut up for a minute.
Yes, you can ask.
All right. I want to piggyback on Moshe's take from the article, where there's sort of like a cycle of 2 concealment, 1 concealment, no concealment, and so forth. And I'm looking at slide number 6, and it says that one collapses under one's weight and cannot continue to strengthen the belief that one's pain comes from the Creator for some hidden reason. Finally, one fails, becomes heretic, says the Creator is not watching over his creations anymore, and that everything transpired by faith and blind nature. And this is called not even seeing the back. It feels like what I'm looking for is like, how does he move from this miserable place of not even seeing the back to seeing the back, to only 1 concealment? What happens in between?
That is where the environment plays the key. So the environment gets a person out of double concealment to single concealment and then to revelation. That's why the environment plays such a key part. If we could just get out of it ourselves, why need the environment? We need the environment because when we're stuck in this double concealment or in a shell, which is also double concealment, that is where we need some desire, you could say, which is seemingly outside of us to actually help us get out of our state. So we need someone who's not in double concealment to get us out of double concealment. And that's the whole reason why we read the books and we have a teacher which is someone that we feel is higher than us, that is not in that double concealment, and then they can pull us out of our double concealment to reach revelation. That is why if you just work with friends without the books and without the teacher, you're not going to advance because they're all in that double concealment. So you can't, someone in double concealment can't get somebody else out of double concealment if they're both in double concealment. You need somebody who's outside of that double concealment to pull them out. And that's why we have the books and that's why we have the teacher.
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll stop here and do the after party.